They said they were too sick to come. That's what my mom wrote in the group text 3 nights before the wedding. Honey, we both came down with something awful, probably that stomach bug going around. We're heartbroken we can't make it, but flying right now would be impossible. Your dad's been throwing up since Monday. I stared at the screen, heart tight and hollow at the same time. I didn't reply right away, just stared, then typed out, "Hope you feel better. Let me know if you need anything." And that was it. My name is Jasmine Miller. I'm 33 years old, a marketing VP at a tech firm in Seattle. And until that night, I still believed my parents might show up when it counted. I'd built most of my life around making things happen without help, first in scholarships, then in career, and eventually in paying off a condo that no one in my family had ever even visited. But this wedding, this one moment, was supposed to be different. It wasn't that I thought we were close. We weren't. My dad, Ronald, was the kind of man who brought up his back pain to avoid apologies. My mom, Sandra, specialized in weaponized guilt and vague compliments that always had a bar buried in them. My younger brother, Blake, was the golden child, charming, jobless, somehow always working on a project that required someone else's money. And me, I was the reliable one, the one who made things work, the one who always showed up even when they didn't. Still, even after everything I had imagined them in the second row, I had picked out a corsage for my mom, a matching tie clip for my dad. I had chosen soft chairs instead of pews because I knew my dad's hip bothered him. I even added a gluten-free dinner option for Blake's imaginary intolerance. I had told myself it didn't matter whether they approved of Nolan, my fiancé, a brilliant and deeply kind ER doctor, but I still wanted them there. Just once I wanted them to show up without needing something first. The morning of the wedding, I got dressed in a suite filled with soft, light makeup brushes and the low hum of a string quartet warming up below. My best friend Angela buttoned the back of my dress while I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to pretend the empty chairs wouldn't mean anything. Nolan's mother, Claire, had slipped in earlier to drop off a small velvet box containing a blue silk handkerchief and a handwritten note that read, "You're loved, more than you know." It made me cry harder than anything my own mother had written in years. The ceremony started just after 3. The aisle was lined with cream roses and trailing ivy. My stomach twisted as I waited behind the doors. And then they opened, and all at once I was walking into a room of faces, some familiar, some smiling, some curious. My eyes flicked toward the second row on the left, empty. I didn't falter. My heel didn't catch. I didn't even blink. But inside, something cracked. Nolan's eyes found mine at the end of the aisle, steady and sure, and I held on to that like it was oxygen. We said our vows beneath a copper arch draped in eucalyptus and soft gold ribbon. He kissed me like we had all the time in the world, and in that moment, I let myself believe that maybe this was the beginning of something better, that the absence behind me didn't matter as much as the presence in front of me. We danced. We toasted. Angela gave a speech that made me laugh and cry. Nolan's cousins pulled me into a circle and taught me their family's wedding chant. And for a few hours, I believed that was enough. I didn't check my phone, I didn't dwell, I just held Nolan's hand and let myself be happy. Until 10:43 p.m. when Angela tapped my shoulder with a strange look on her face and held out her phone. "I think you need to see this," she said. On the screen was a Facebook livestream posted just 30 minutes earlier. I took the phone. My breath caught. The screen showed a backyard strung with bistro lights and folding tables covered in food. There was my mother laughing, her hair done up, holding a glass of sangria. There was my father, not pale or feverish, but grilling burgers and wearing the same Oregon State hoodie he'd worn to every tailgate since I was in high school. There was Blake, holding his phone in selfie mode, grinning like a teenager as music blasted in the background. And then I heard it. "Don't tell Jasmine," he laughed. "She thinks we're homesick. Let her believe that." The camera tilted as someone off-screen shouted, "Real family doesn't bail on real fun," and then everyone laughed. My mother, my father Blake, all of them. I handed the phone back and walked away slowly toward the coat check, toward the edge of the ballroom, toward a version of myself that I had buried under years of excuses. The air outside was cold. Not winter cold, but sharp enough to make my eyes sting. Or maybe that was something else. Angela followed me out. Jazz, she started. I shook my head. I'm fine. But I wasn't. Because at that moment, standing in my wedding dress in a quiet alley behind a venue I had paid for beneath string lights, I had personally approved. I knew something I hadn't wanted to admit for years. My family hadn't just skipped my wedding. They had lied, laughed about it, and celebrated together while I walked down the aisle alone. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt. I felt something colder, cleaner, like a line had been drawn, not just in the air, but in blood. I didn't go back inside right away. I stood there for a long time, gripping the edge of my clutch while the music drifted through the walls and the laughter echoed from a screen I couldn't unsee. I had promised myself I'd wait to deal with it until after the honeymoon. But now I knew I was already done waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Not even after Nolan and I returned to the hotel suite, the one with the overpriced champagne and complimentary slippers I'd booked months ago, thinking I'd be glowing with joy. He tried to make me laugh, tried to pull me into that soft, newlywed bubble. I let him. I smiled. I laid my head on his chest when we turned the lights out, but my eyes stayed open and the laughter from that video played on loop behind them. At 3:12 a.m., while Nolan snored gently beside me, I slipped out of bed and padded barefoot across the suite to the armchair by the window. Seattle's skyline was mostly dark except for the blinking red of construction cranes and the orange hum of street lamps. I pulled up the video again, not because I wanted to punish myself, but because something inside me needed confirmation. Maybe it had been a misunderstanding. Maybe I'd imagined the tone. I tapped play. The camera shook slightly. Blake's phone. Someone handed him a skewer stacked with grilled shrimp, and he grinned like the whole world belonged to him. I caught the reflection of my mom in the glass door behind him, waving her arms as she twirled around to music that definitely didn't scream, "Recovering from a stomach virus." Then the screen turned, panning toward the fire pit, where my dad sat in a camp chair sipping from a whiskey tumbler, his arm thrown casually around the shoulders of our cousin Carly, who had claimed she couldn't afford a flight. Blake say something to the people, someone off-screen shouted. He winked. "Shh, she thinks we're sick. Let her believe that." Laughter erupted. My mom appeared beside him with a plate of sliders. "We earned one peaceful evening," she said, as if I were the storm. Then, looking right into the camera, she added, "Honestly, who plans a wedding during allergy season anyway?" More laughter. The camera dipped. Someone turned up the music. I paused the video. My hand was trembling, not from rage exactly, but from recognition. It wasn't a new feeling. Just sharper now, no longer buried under plausible excuses. I remembered a school play in 10th grade, how they'd skipped it because the car battery died. I remembered the college graduation they tried to live stream from a hotel room in Vegas. Even my first apartment they hadn't helped me move, saying the stairs would be too much on Dad's knees. But they'd gone on a wine tour that same weekend. I had always told myself it wasn't personal, that they weren't great at showing up for anything, that I was being overly sensitive. But this was different, because this time it wasn't just neglect. It was a deliberate performance. They hadn't just missed my wedding, they had celebrated their absence. Together. Proudly. What stung most wasn't the lie, it was how effortlessly they told it. Like it cost them nothing. I looked down at my wedding dress still hanging in its garment bag in the corner. Nolan had suggested we have it preserved. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Right now it felt like an artifact from a moment I hadn't actually lived. The next morning, as sunlight broke through the clouds, I sat across from Nolan at breakfast. He reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know yesterday wasn't what you pictured." I nodded. I wanted to say something. I just didn't know what. I was still sorting through the quiet embarrassment of having walked down the aisle alone. My coworkers had been there. Nolan's entire family had been there. They all saw the empty row. Everyone had assumed it meant tragedy, illness, crisis, and I nodded along, smiling tightly, letting them believe whatever gave them comfort. But the truth felt more humiliating. I had been lied to. Not quietly, not for my protection, but with full, casual cruelty. And all of it was public now. That video wasn't private. It had comments, likes, little emoji reactions from distant cousins and high school acquaintances. One said, "You guys look amazing. Congrats to Blake and the crew." Another, This is what real family looks like. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just scrolled. Nolan watched me. You don't have to pretend you're okay. I'm not pretending, I said. I'm processing. And I was. But it wasn't grief. Not yet. It was something deeper, something hollow and dangerous. The kind of hurt that comes when the scales fall off your eyes and you realize the story you've been telling yourself about your own family doesn't hold up anymore. That afternoon, after we got home, I made tea and sat on the couch in sweats. Nolan unpacked. He gave me space. He always did. I scrolled through Blake's profile again, watching his party clips on loop reels of grilled food, dancing hugs and clinking glasses. My mom in a new red blouse I'd never seen. My dad spinning a yard game paddle like a DJ. At one point, Blake said, "Glad we kept this one small. No drama, no drama." I guess I was the drama. I took a slow sip of tea, the kind with too much lemon that stings a little on the way down. And somewhere between that sip and the next breath, I stopped making excuses. They hadn't been too sick. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't misunderstood. They had chosen not to come. And that was the beginning of the end. It's strange how fast your mind rewinds once a pattern clicks into place. One minute, you're watching your mother twirl through someone else's party with a wine glass in hand, and the next, you're back in college holding a second part-time job because your dad said the loan check got delayed again. I remember the first time I sent them money. I was 22, barely 3 weeks into my first real job. It wasn't even a full paycheck yet, just enough to cover my rent and maybe buy groceries that didn't come in cans. But Mom had called me sobbing, said Dad had made a bad investment, that rent was overdue and they were afraid of being evicted. Just $1, $200, Jazz, she said. Just for now. We'll pay you back soon, promise. I wired it that same afternoon. They never paid it back. That moment should have been a one-time thing. A glitch. A family emergency in the true sense. But instead, it became a blueprint. The next month, Dad's car broke down and he needed help covering repairs. Then Blake had a dental emergency. Then Mom's friend lost her job and they couldn't let her starve, which somehow required me to fund 2 weeks of groceries. It wasn't always framed as a demand. Sometimes it was a suggestion, a sigh over the phone, a long pause until I said, "Do you need me to help?" Then came the silence. That weaponized kind of silence, I learned to dread, the kind that said, "We won't say it outright, but you know what to do." By the time I was 26, I had fully accepted that I would be the family safety net. They didn't ask. They expected. Blake, in particular, was an expert in the emotional pitch. He had this way of calling me Jazzy only when he needed something, always slipping it into the text or voicemail right before the ask. "Hey, Jazzy, can you cover my rent just for this month? It's been a rough one." "Hey, Jazzy." My insurance didn't kick in yet, and they're saying I need to pay up front. The worst was when he got hit with that hospital bill after a minor motorcycle accident. Mom called me at work crying so hard I couldn't make out her words. I stepped out of a marketing meeting, crouched behind a stairwell, and transferred $800 from my savings without even asking for paperwork. Blake later texted me a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No thank you, no follow-up. Looking back, the money wasn't even the worst part. It was the performance that came with it. The way they all acted afterward, like I should be proud, like I was fulfilling some destiny of being the dependable one. Dad would say things like, "You're the glue in this family," as if glue wasn't just something you use when things are broken. And I believed them. That was the wildest part. I really did. I wore the responsibility like a badge, quietly, noble, quietly drained. The year I turned 30, I tried to take a solo vacation to Spain. I'd never been to Europe, had dreamt about it since college. I booked everything months in advance. 2 weeks before departure, Mom called me in a panic. She said Blake's girlfriend had lost her job and their lease was ending. He needed a place to stay or money to stay where he was. I remember staring at my packed suitcase, at the plane ticket printed out on my desk. I canceled the trip, sent him $200. He broke up with the girl a week later. They didn't even mention the canceled trip. Now, sitting in my apartment, days after the wedding, I could see the wedding for what it really was, not an isolated slight, but a symptom of the same old script. They didn't come because they didn't have to. Because they knew I'd still hold my tongue, still send the holiday gifts, still carry the emotional load. They didn't come because I was never the daughter they had to win over. I was the one they used. The golden child was Blake. It always had been. He didn't need a stable job or a college degree. He just needed to show up with a smile and a sob story. When I landed a promotion, they told me not to brag. When he got a seasonal gig at a brewery, they threw him a congratulatory dinner. I tried to bring it up once gently during Thanksgiving. I said, "Sometimes I feel like you treat Blake differently." Dad's face went cold. "Are you seriously trying to turn this into a scorecard? That's not how family works." Mom added, "You've always been so sensitive. That was the last time I brought it up, and now I could finally admit the truth. It had always been this way. The wedding didn't change anything. It just exposed it. The way they skipped it, lied about it, then toasted each other in my absence wasn't a surprise. It was just the first time they didn't bother to pretend. And maybe that was the most honest thing they'd ever done. We were supposed to be in Santa Fe. That was the plan, 5 days at a secluded adobe inn tucked into the high desert with outdoor hot tubs, no cell service, and warm evenings spent watching the sun dip behind the mesas. I'd booked it 6 months in advance after scrolling through reviews that promised quiet magic and peace you can feel in your bones. It was meant to be the pause, a small act of celebration before everything resumed. But 2 days after the wedding, I emailed the front desk and canceled. I blamed unforeseen work responsibilities, told Nolan it was just bad timing with a product launch, and promised we'd reschedule soon. He didn't push. That was the thing about Nolan. He had a kind of steadiness I hadn't yet learned to mirror. He asked once then, "Let me decide the pace." I told myself I was grateful for that. Told myself I needed space to decompress. But the truth was, I didn't want peace. Not yet. I wanted answers. The morning I should have been sipping coffee under the shadow of red cliffs, I sat cross-legged on the living room rug with my laptop open and a yellow legal pad beside me. It started with a list, just a practical clinical review of all the accounts I'd ever shared with my family. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. It was more like a restless itch, a need to confirm the doors were locked. There was the old joint account I'd opened for Mom back when I was 24, and she claimed she couldn't keep up with utility payments on her own. I remembered closing it when I moved to Seattle, or at least I thought I had. I searched the name of the credit union, entered my old login, reset the password. When I got in, the screen blinked and pulled up a statement dated just 6 days ago. The account was still active. I stared. It had a balance of $18.34, but that wasn't what made my stomach drop. It was the recent activity, small recurring deposits, $75 here, $50 there, each marked cash deposit in branch, and the account holder name hadn't changed. Jasmine M. Miller. My name, alone, which meant they were still using it, still depositing funds into an account they weren't supposed to have access to, still letting my name be the front for something I no longer controlled. I clicked through older statements. One withdrawal was for a family phone plan, another for groceries, Safeway Portland, and another line item, Blake Miller, payment Zelle transfer. It wasn't just that the account was open, it was that it had become a shadow wallet, a quiet place they could funnel activity under my name using the system I'd once offered in good faith. I closed the laptop and just sat there for a while, palms flat against the carpet. It was the kind of stillness that doesn't calm you, the kind that amplifies. Nolan came in at one point with his gym bag slung over one shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just going through some old stuff. Want to clean up a few things?" He leaned down, kissed the top of my head, and left without asking more. That was the hard part. He didn't know. What he didn't know. I hadn't told him about the history, about how many times I'd wired money, how often I'd skipped things to cover for someone else's bad planning. I think I always hoped that by keeping it separate, it wouldn't stain this new life. But it had already leaked in. I reopened the laptop and started downloading statements, 1 month at a time. I built a spreadsheet and color-coded the entries, red for anything unauthorized, yellow for anything unexplained. It Felt strange building a case against my own family, like I was sneaking through a house I used to live in, finding doors I never knew were locked. I called the bank's customer service line and waited on hold for 36 minutes before someone finally picked up. The woman's voice was chipper robotic. I gave her the account number and said I thought this account was closed. I need to verify who has access. She paused, clicked through something on her end. It looks like the account was set to active by an in-branch rep in January of last year. Signature matched the original owner, Jasmine Miller. That's me, I said. But I haven't set foot in Oregon since Thanksgiving the year before. Can you tell me which branch, Clackamas, she replied. Is that not close to you? No, I said. Not even remotely. I hung up, added the note to my spreadsheet. Then I saved everything in a folder titled Family Activity. Review, not fraud, not theft, not yet, but the word hovered at the edge of my thoughts like a match just waiting to be struck. I knew I wasn't ready to confront them, not yet. But I also knew this wasn't just about my wedding anymore. It wasn't even about the party they threw behind my back. This was about something older, something embedded. This was about control and how they'd kept it even after I thought I'd walked away. I didn't call my mother. I didn't text Blake. I didn't ask them why. That part of me, the one that used to hope for a reasonable explanation for some twist of misunderstanding, had gone silent. Instead, I opened my contacts and tapped on Hannah Leeds. We weren't close friends, but we had worked together 2 years ago when I helped Blake out of a lease dispute after he ghosted his landlord. She was sharp, thorough, and the only lawyer I knew who didn't sugarcoat things. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, but when she picked up her voice, didn't skip a beat. Jasmine, this is a surprise. I took a breath. I need to verify some financial activity that might involve misuse of my information. Possibly identity fraud. I'm not sure. I'm not. Her tone shifted instantly. Talk to me. I explained everything: the old credit union account I thought had been closed, the in-branch reactivation in Clackamas, the recent deposits, the Zelle transfers to Blake. I could hear her scribbling notes in the background, asking precise, pointed questions. She didn't sound shocked, only steady. Lawyers tend to meet betrayal with process, not panic. Have you run a credit report recently? She asked. Not since last fall. Do it now. Let's see what else is active under your name. We'll cross-reference addresses and filing activity. I opened a tab and pulled up my Equifax account. It took a few minutes to authenticate. Ironic, I thought how many steps it took to prove I was myself when someone else had apparently been using my identity without a second thought. The report loaded. At first glance, nothing screamed out of place, but then I scrolled down and paused at a filing address I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine, not any address I'd ever used. But it rang a sick kind of bell. Blake's last known apartment, the one where he briefly lived with his ex, the girlfriend who supposedly couldn't keep a job and had been the reason I canceled my Spain trip to send them money. I clicked into the tax history section. There, clear as day, were 2 annual tax returns submitted under my name claiming a combination of education credits and dependent deductions. The SSN matched mine. The address matched Blake's. My stomach twisted. Found something, I said quietly. Hannah's voice was calm but firm. What I told her. I couldn't even bring myself to read all the lines out loud, just described the high-level facts. She listened, then asked the one question I had been trying not to let fully settle in my mind. Do you think your mother filed those returns? I closed my eyes. Yes, I said. She always handled the paperwork for Blake. He's never filed anything on his own. She used to brag about doing his FAFSA for him every year in college. Silence stretched for a beat. Then we're not just dealing with emotional manipulation or financial overreach. We're looking at identity misuse, Hannah said. Possibly fraud. That word again. This time spoken aloud, not just dancing at the edge of my thoughts. Fraud. I pulled my knees up to my chest and stared at the edge of the coffee table, heart thudding in a slow, heavy rhythm. I thought of all the times I'd justified their behavior. All the times I told myself they're just struggling or they don't know better or that's just how my family works. But this wasn't just dysfunction. This was deliberate, calculated. They didn't just lean on me. They took what wasn't theirs and signed my name to it. They didn't make a mistake. They made a decision. And for the first time in my life, I felt something more than betrayal. I felt violated. The kind of violation that makes you question every point of contact you ever allowed. Every birthday check, every spare key, every forgotten login detail you once casually texted to your mother. It was like realizing your house had been broken into, but not recently. Years ago. And the person had been living in your guest room the entire time. Hannah's voice softened. Do you want to file formally? I don't know. I whispered. Not yet. I just needed to know I wasn't imagining it. You're not, she said. And if they push again, you'll have a full record to protect yourself. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat in silence for a long while. Not angry, not even surprised. Just hollow. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Family Activity, Review, and renamed it The Real Celebration. Because that's what it had been, hadn't it? That barbecue, that string of years. They'd been celebrating all along, celebrating what they could take, what they could spin, what they could rewrite in their favor. And I'd just been footing the bill. I didn't rush to call them. I gave myself a few days to sit with the evidence, to run the facts over and over in my head until I could recite them like a script. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted answers. Or maybe more honestly, I wanted the performance to end. No more pretending they didn't know. No more sugar-coated denial. I wanted to hear them admit it, even if just once. It was a Wednesday evening when I made the call. Nolan was still at the hospital on the late shift. I'd waited on purpose, knowing I wouldn't want him to hear whatever happened next. I sat at the kitchen counter, wine glass, full but untouched fingers drumming softly against the granite as I pulled up Mom's number and pressed dial. She answered on the third ring. Sweetheart. Her voice was warm, lilting. Are you finally back from your honeymoon? We've been meaning to call, I canceled it. I said flatly. A pause. Oh. Well, that's a shame. Everything okay? I ignored the question. I found the credit union account. Another pause, this one tighter, smaller. Then, what account? The one I opened when I was 24? You were using it as recently as last week. I don't think that's... Hold on, are you sure it wasn't just something automatic? Maybe something you set up and forgot about? I let the silence do the answering. Mom, I said gentler than I felt I've seen the statements. Deposits, withdrawals, transfers to Blake, all under my name. Well, she said, voice stretching like plastic wrap, it's just a little help between family. You always said we could use it for small things, remember? That was years ago. I closed it, but it still works right, she said quickly, almost brightly. And I never used it for anything dangerous, just things we needed. What about filing tax returns under my name, using Blake's address? Did you need that too? Silence. I didn't. Jasmine. That must be a mistake. I don't know anything about taxes. Maybe the accountant. You haven't had an accountant since Dad stopped working, I snapped. Another long silence. Then her voice dropped into the soft, tremulous tone I knew too well. You know your father doesn't handle stress well. If you're going to start digging up things, at least be careful. Don't turn this into a fight. I felt something inside me shrink. I'm not turning this into anything. I'm just telling the truth. Well, maybe some things are better left in the past, she said quietly. Families help each other. That's what we've always done. No, I said. Families don't lie and steal and pretend they're doing you a favor for it. She exhaled sharply. You've always been so intense, Jasmine. You don't let anything go. You hold on to every little slight like it's war. I could feel the tremble starting in my hands, but I kept my voice even. I didn't say anything about the wedding. I let that go, but this, you're using my name, my identity. You're putting me at risk. Just then, I heard the rustling of movement on the other end. A new voice cut in deeper. Rougher. Are you kidding me, Dad? I braced myself. You call up here to accuse your mother like she's some criminal after everything we've done for you. His voice was rising, barrel-chested, and loud enough to feel like a punch through the phone. I'm not accusing. I'm stating facts. Oh, now you're the police after all we did for you. Now you want to police a few dollars. It wasn't a few dollars. I said, my voice shaking now. It was years of manipulation, thousands of dollars. My name on federal documents I never signed. You wouldn't have gotten through school if we hadn't helped you, he barked. Don't forget that. We fed you. We sacrificed. And now you're acting like a damn stranger. I've been paying you back since I was 22, I whispered. I've paid for groceries, rent your prescriptions, Blake's bills, your utilities. Because you could, he snapped. You make more than we ever did. Don't act like a victim. I pulled the phone away from my ear. Not hung up, just needed distance from the noise. I set it down on speaker and listened to the faint, echoing rant that continued on the counter, his voice carrying on without needing an audience. I didn't say anything else. I just waited for the tirade to burn out. Eventually, I heard Mom again, her voice small like a child caught between parents. I just thought it would be easier this way. You're always so independent, Jasmine. We didn't think you'd mind. Easier? The word stuck in my throat. I ended the call without saying goodbye. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed again, a text from Blake. Short. Simple. You've always been dramatic. This is why no one invites you to real family stuff. I stared at it for a long time. The words didn't sting at first. They just hovered there like static, but then something cold began to move under my skin. Because it was true. Not the part about being dramatic, but the second part. They didn't invite me. Not to the backyard party. Not to the truth. Not into their circle, even when I was paying for the damn fence around it. And with that text, something gave way. Not like a break, more like a release. Because now I knew it wasn't that I didn't belong, it was that I was never supposed to. The morning after Blake's text, I woke up before the sun. Not from nightmares, not from anxiety, just from a sense of clarity so sharp it felt surgical. I lay still for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of our apartment. Nolan was already at the hospital, the quiet hum of his early shift routine long gone. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't waiting for something to erupt. There was no emotional storm on the horizon, just the slow, deliberate dawn of a decision. I made coffee, not because I needed the caffeine, but because the steps grounded me. Boil, pour, stir. And then I sat down at my desk, pulled my laptop close, and opened every digital window that they had ever used to reach into my life. First, the old credit union account. I transferred the remaining balance, $18 and change, into a new account I had opened in my name alone, then requested formal closure. I added a fraud notice for good measure, just in case anyone tried to reopen it using that Clackamas branch again. I scheduled an appointment with a notary to finalize a revocation of access document. Next was the mobile service. For years, I'd kept my mother on my phone plan because it was cheaper this way. What it really meant was I paid, and she got to avoid the bill. I deactivated the extra lines. It would go into effect by the end of the cycle, and she'd get a notification. She'd call. I wouldn't answer. Then came the credit cards. I had once added Dad as an authorized user on a low-limit card back when I was fresh out of grad school, thinking it would help his score. That card had sat unused for years until last spring when small charges for gas and electronics started showing up. Nothing major, but enough to be noticed. I closed the account and shredded the backup card I hadn't touched in a decade. Each action felt like tightening a drawstring around the life I'd built. Not cutting people out exactly, but pulling the boundary taut. Finally, I logged into my payroll portal and removed the secondary checking account my mother had once used just for emergencies. It hadn't been touched in over a year, but still, the gate had to close. By the time I looked at the clock, it was only 9:42 a.m. I had been working for 3.5 hours and I didn't feel tired. I felt awake. That was when I called Hannah again. I want to take the next step, I said. She didn't ask me to explain. You mean legal notice? Yes, to my father and to Blake. I want it in writing. I want them to understand that they are not to access anything under my name, past or future. Financial, tax-related, digital. I want clear language, no wiggle room. I can draft a cease and desist with formal record, she said. And we should attach a financial protection clause so that if any identity misuse continues, it sets up the basis for escalation. Do it, I said. She asked for some paperwork, which I scanned and sent over within the hour. While she worked on the document, I opened another browser tab and went to the IRS website. I had read the steps the night before. Submitting an identity theft affidavit was straightforward, but emotionally, it felt like crossing a line. It meant I wasn't just suspicious, I was declaring in official terms that something criminal had happened. Not just dysfunctional, not just disappointing, criminal. But this wasn't revenge. I wasn't doing it to punish them. I was doing it to build distance, the kind that could be enforced by law, not guilt. The kind they couldn't dismantle with one sad voicemail or some half apology buried inside a Facebook birthday post. I submitted the form and saved the confirmation to my desktop. Later that afternoon, Hannah sent me a draft of the letter. It was concise, sterile, legally bulletproof. It outlined the unauthorized use of my accounts, the misuse of my social security number, and stated clearly that any further unauthorized access would be reported as criminal fraud. I read it 3 times, approved it. She mailed physical copies with delivery tracking and emailed digital versions as backup. She asked if I wanted to include a message, something softer, more personal. No, I said. Let the silence say what it needs to. That night I cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta with roasted vegetables and garlic. I ate alone, watched the sun slip behind the skyline, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Not my explanations, not my money, not even my forgiveness. This wasn't payback. This was protection. And it started with a single, simple boundary, drawn cleanly, held firmly, not because I was angry, but because I was finally done. It started subtly like a trickle before a flood. A text from Mrs. Dorman, my high school math teacher turned family friend. Hey, sweetheart, I hope you're okay. I saw something online. Just wanted to say I'm praying for your heart. Family's hard sometimes. Then came the email from my mom's old coworker, a woman I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Jasmine, I don't know what's happening between you and your folks, but life's short. Hope you don't regret anything down the line. I stared at my screen, confused at first. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't said a word publicly. My world, as far as I knew, had gone quiet. But then, I opened Facebook. It wasn't a dramatic post. No names, no accusations, just a soft-pedaled guilt trip, dressed up as a lament. My mother had written, "When your child forgets where they come from." It's a different kind of heartbreak. Beneath it, dozens of comments bloomed like fungus. Oh, honey, sending hugs. Kids these days don't know sacrifice. You were such a devoted mom. I'm so sorry. Stay strong. One day she'll remember who raised her. One woman even tagged me, subtly. Hope she sees this and realizes what she's lost. I didn't reply. I didn't even like or angry face react. I just screenshot every line, every comment, every piece of the script they were constructing. Because that's what it was, a script. In their version of the story, I was no longer the daughter who'd paid the electric bill in December or who drove through snow to deliver Blake's antibiotics because he refused to go to urgent care. I wasn't the one who gave up bonuses, vacations, mental space. I wasn't the backbone. I was the villain. The cold, ungrateful child who forgot where she came from. It amazed me how quickly they pivoted from using me to vilifying me. One moment, I was a lifeline. The next, I was a traitor. The difference, I'd said no. I closed the app and sat very still. It was one thing to feel the weight of estrangement in private, to absorb the pain of silence and disconnection. It was another to be dragged passively and vaguely in front of a hometown audience who didn't know the full picture and likely didn't care. I didn't owe them my story, but that didn't mean it didn't sting. That evening, Nolan came home to find me organizing digital folders, evidence logs, notes from Hannah screenshots labeled by date. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before sitting beside me. "They're playing victim," he said, scrolling gently through the open window on my laptop. "Of course they are," I said. "They don't know how to exist unless someone else is the problem." His voice was calm. "You thinking about responding?" I shook my head. "No, not yet. Maybe not ever. Let them have their performance. I'm not stepping on that stage." He nodded, then reached for my hand. His presence was solid like gravity, but even with him beside me, I felt the old ache, the one I hadn't named yet. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the grief of being misunderstood by people who never bothered to understand you in the first place. Later that night, another message came in, this time from the mother of a girl I grew up with in youth group. "I saw your mom at the grocery store. She looked Tired, said you don't call anymore. It broke my heart. You were always such a good kid. I read it 3 times. A good kid. That was the thing. I had been. I'd played that role so well, but at some point being good had just meant being available. Being generous meant being silent. And loyalty had turned into self-erasure. They missed who I was before, not because they loved that version more, but because she was easier to use. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I added it to the growing PDF. I didn't know what I was building, exactly some hybrid of a journal and a legal archive. But it made me feel less crazy, less like I was imagining the backlash, and more like I was simply documenting the fallout. That weekend, Nolan suggested a hike. "Let's get out of here," he said. "No phones, no screens, just trees and your boots on dirt." We drove to a nearby trailhead and walked for hours through sun-dappled forest past pines so tall they swallowed sound. Somewhere along the ridge I stopped and looked back at the path we'd climbed. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I smiled, just barely. "I'm thinking, if they need me to be the villain to protect their illusion, that's fine." I looked forward again toward the winding trail ahead, but I won't apologize for walking away from the story they wrote for me. Claire's invitation was simple Sunday brunch. Just her, Nolan, and me. No drama, no extra chairs. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding, since I walked down the aisle alone, since the barbecue, since the text from Blake that cracked me open. I'd filed the IRS fraud affidavit, shut off the accounts, and tried to wear silence like peace. Claire opened the door before we knocked, wearing a soft sweater and gold hoops, her hair in a low knot. Her house smelled like lemon zest and something slow-cooked. Nolan kissed her cheek. She handed me a mug of coffee, already half full. "You look tired," she said gently. "New marriage or new war?" "A little of both," I answered with a smile that didn't quite reach. We sat at the oak table, sun warming the kitchen tile. For a while, we just ate. Nolan told a story about a patient who swallowed a Lego. Claire laughed, and I laughed too until the moment stretched quiet. Claire refilled my mug and sat across from me, stirring her tea with slow, deliberate circles. My sister used to say the best families are the ones where love isn't earned. It's just given. I held the cup tighter. She went on, calm and steady. Some people parent through guilt, others through love. But love doesn't cost this much, Jasmine. It doesn't make you bankrupt yourself to feel seen. I stared at the steam. It's not even the money. It's what it meant. I was useful, not loved, just functional. Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "Then, I hope this next chapter of your life makes space for being seen." The tears came without warning. Quiet, not dramatic. I looked down, but she didn't pull her hand back. Just rubbed her thumb across my knuckles and waited. Nolan moved his chair closer, silently. I wiped my cheeks. I thought I already grieved at the family I didn't get, but sitting here with you, it feels like I'm mourning something I never even had. Claire nodded. That's the hardest grief, not losing something, but realizing it was never offered at all. She didn't scold, didn't sigh, didn't make it about herself, just handed me another slice of sourdough and asked if I wanted more jam. When brunch was over and Nolan loaded the dishwasher, Claire walked me to the door. The air smelled like rain and early autumn. She touched my arm. "You don't have to become them to survive them," she said. "And you don't have to earn love here." I couldn't speak. I nodded, stepped into the driveway. On the way home, the car was quiet, but not the kind that hurts. My phone buzzed once from my bag. I didn't check it. Instead, I stared out the window and let myself feel the new weight in my chest. A kind that didn't burn. For once, I wasn't trying to earn my place at the table. I was just allowed to sit. It arrived at 7:06 a.m., the Venmo notification lighting up my phone just as I was brushing my teeth, barely awake. A request from Blake. $4, $200. Label Family Recovery Fund. I stood there, toothbrush in hand, staring at the screen like it might blink away if I looked long enough. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A joke, maybe. Some twisted attempt at humor, but then I checked the comment thread below it. He'd already tagged Mom and Dad. Jasmine's helping, right? She owes the family at least that much. My stomach turned. I didn't reply. I didn't hit decline or block or even screenshot it. I just closed the app, rinsed my mouth, and sat on the edge of the tub, shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer disbelief that Blake still believed I could be summoned like that. It wasn't the money. It was the shamelessness, the expectation. As if I hadn't changed a single lock. By the time I made it to the kitchen, Nolan was pouring coffee, humming softly. I didn't mention the Venmo request. I thought maybe, foolishly, it would just go away. It didn't. The next day, Nolan called me from the hospital during his lunch break. His voice was clipped low. "Did you list Blake as your emergency contact at any point recently?" I paused. "No." "Why?" He exhaled slowly. "He called the nurses' station this morning, pretending to be your emergency contact. Said there was a situation at home and that you might be emotionally unstable." The room tilted a little. He asked to speak to someone in psych, claimed you were a danger to yourself after cutting off the family, and wanted a wellness check. Thankfully, the charge nurse flagged it and called me instead. I gripped the edge of the counter. "He tried to get a psych evaluation opened on me. He's playing dirty now," Nolan said. "This isn't just about money anymore. This is psychological warfare." My hands trembled, but not with fear. This was something deeper, a current of humiliation, rage, and disbelief. He used my name. On a medical call. He did. And I've already filed a formal report with HR and security. But Jasmine, he's escalating. You need to know that. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. He doesn't know where we live now. I whispered. No. But he doesn't need to show up to your door to cause damage. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The sun streamed in through the blinds, but it didn't feel warm. It felt like exposure. This wasn't a disagreement. This wasn't a family falling out. This was a campaign. I opened my laptop and forwarded the Venmo request to Hannah, along with a typed description of Blake's call to the hospital. Subject: escalation, need to discuss next legal step. Then, without hesitating, I opened Venmo, found Blake's profile, and blocked him. I deleted my account after that. I would rather go back to writing checks than leave another window open. I scrolled through my contact list, deleting names one by one. Mutual friends, neighbors from back home, Blake's ex-girlfriend who still liked my posts, anyone who could pass messages or be used as a conduit. By the time Nolan came home that night, I had a manila folder open on the dining table with printed screenshots, legal notes from Hannah, and a small stack of Post-its with to-do items written in my sharpest handwriting. He glanced at the folder, then at me. "You okay?" I nodded. "No panic today. Just planning." He walked over, pressed a kiss to the top of my head. I filed an additional report with the hospital. They'll tag his name. He won't get past the front desk again. "Good," I said. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the phrase Family Recovery Fund. Recovery from what? From losing access to my paycheck, from losing their emotional scapegoat, from realizing that I wouldn't keep showing up for a part I never auditioned for. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, one hand on my stomach like I was trying to settle something inside me. They hadn't lost me because I changed. They lost me because I finally realized I didn't have to keep being the quiet, good daughter who bailed them out and swallowed the cost. And Blake, he wasn't trying to fix anything, he was trying to control the narrative. But I had already stepped out of their story, and they were the ones now scrambling for a rewrite. I didn't do it all at once. Cutting them out wasn't a single cinematic moment. It was a series of small, deliberate click steps, closures. It started with my phone. Every contact tied to my parents or Blake, even the fringe ones, the cousins who never reached out unless someone died or got married, the neighbor who always asked how your mama's doing, gone. Numbers blocked, emails rerouted to a filtered folder I'd never check. My passwords changed. A new mailing address linked only to my work. P.O. box, not my home. No breadcrumbs, no way back. Christmas cards, canceled. I took myself off the shared Amazon holiday registry Mom had kept since 2011, the family Dropbox with scanned childhood photos, left it, deleted my access. I made peace with never seeing those images again. It felt like tossing out relics from a house that had burned down long ago. I told Nolan after it was done. "It's not a statement," I said. "It's maintenance." He didn't ask for details, just nodded and reached across the couch, wrapping my hand in his. You okay? I was quiet for a long time. I think I'm okay. We had our first quiet Thanksgiving that year, just us and 2 friends from Nolan's residency with potluck dishes and no table drama, no someone storming out, no comments about my weight or career or how Blake just needed time to figure things out. We played cards. We laughed. No one cried in the bathroom. I didn't check my phone once. 3 days later, I had my standing session with Ava, my therapist. Her office was warm, always smelled faintly of eucalyptus, and her chairs were soft without sinking you in too far. I liked that about her, grounded but never overly sentimental. She waited until I settled in before speaking. So, she said gently, you made the cut. I nodded, all of it. How do you feel? I stared at the bookshelf behind her desk, tracing the titles with my eyes, then looked back at her. Not angry, I said. Just tore clean. Like there's static I didn't realize I was living with for years, and now it's just gone. Ava smiled but didn't fill the space. She let me keep going. I always thought going no contact would feel like punishment. Like I'd always be looking over my shoulder or second-guessing, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels quiet, and I don't mean lonely, I mean peace. She nodded. That's often the part people don't talk about. That absence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's just room for breath. I exhaled slowly. That's exactly it. I can finally breathe. The next week I bought a new journal and labeled the first page, Things That Aren't Mine to Carry Anymore. I filled it slowly, phrases, expectations, moments that had haunted me for years. Blake's debt is not mine. Their shame is not mine. Their Facebook narratives are not mine. Their grief isn't mine to fix. I wrote until my hand cramped. The apartment felt different now. Bigger somehow. Quieter in the best ways. No buzz of dread when the phone rang. No guilt when I didn't respond to a vague, manipulative message. I cooked more. Walked more. I even started sketching again, something I hadn't done since college when my mother called it a hobby that pays nothing. The cut wasn't about cruelty, it was about clarity, and for the first time in my life, I could see exactly where I ended and they began. And I had no intention of going back. Thanksgiving arrived like a heavy gray sky, quiet, weighty, and without promise. Nolan was working a double shift at the hospital, so one of the residents with kids could be home. I told him it was fine, and I meant it. I woke late, made coffee in the mug Nolan gave me last year, the one that said, let it simmer and watch the wind thread through the trees. No texts, no happy Thanksgiving from Mom, no Blake memes, no last-minute group chats or blurry photos, just silence. I cooked anyway, not from cheer, but from habit. Rituals ground me. A small turkey breast garlic green beans stuffing Claire taught me to make without canned soup. The house smelled warm and full. I played Miles Davis on vinyl, the trumpet settling into the corners like it belonged there. At 3, I sat down at the little round table, 1 plate, 1 glass of wine, no grace, but I paused. Thought about Thanksgivings past, Mom barking orders, Blake arriving late, and loud political arguments and tears over old photos. I always cleaned up, smiled too much, kept the tension from spilling over. I was insulation. Now it was quiet, not lonely, just still. A different ache, cleaner than betrayal. I missed the idea of family more than the people themselves. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. I froze. It was Claire, a photo of her and Nolan at the hospital. He held up a tray with sad pumpkin pie, grinning. She wrote, "Not your rosemary roast, but we're surviving. Sending love, Jazz." I smiled. For real. After dinner, I boxed up leftovers and saved a slice for Nolan. I opened my laptop and scrolled through old recipes, ones I used to print for Mom, hoping she'd want to try something new. She never did. Said, "We don't need fancy." Now I knew she wasn't talking about food. She meant feelings, no depth, no boundaries, no truth, but I needed all of it. Later, I stepped onto the balcony. The neighborhood was still chimneys breathing into the night. I held my mug close, let the silence settle in. This is what it feels like when the performance ends. No forced laughs, no hovering fear of a ruined moment, Just sage in the air and peace that wasn't artificial. Back inside, I opened the notebook Ava had me keep and wrote beneath last week's entry, "Silence can hurt, but it hurts less than false warmth." Then I underlined it. Twice. It started by accident, one cold Saturday morning at the Lincoln Heights Community Center. I had only planned to drop off canned goods for a donation drive. But Tasha, the coordinator with steady eyes and the voice of someone who'd carried too many burdens and still showed up, stopped me at the door. "We're short this week," she said, handing me a marker. "Budgeting workshop. You look like you know your way around a spreadsheet." I blinked, then laughed. That's not wrong, so I stayed. I scribbled numbers on a stained whiteboard and walked a dozen girls through emergency funds, interest rates, how to call your bank without apologizing. They were young, balancing work school sometimes kids. They asked smart questions and shared stories that echoed parts of mine. I came back the next Saturday. And the next. We talked about how debt isn't failure, how saying no to family isn't selfish, and how financial literacy can be a survival skill. It became my new rhythm, one I hadn't realized I needed. After a session on setting boundaries, one girl lingered. Kira, maybe 21, slight and quiet. "I used to think saying no meant I didn't care," she said. "But the way you explain it, it sounds like survival." I smiled, throat tight. That's because it is. Later, when the classroom emptied out, I sat alone for a while. Something about the quiet space, those folding chairs, the smell of dry erase markers felt grounding. I thought of all the overdraft fees I'd paid for Blake, the favors I couldn't afford, the years I mistook guilt for love. Now, I was turning that into something useful. At the end of the month, Tasha handed me a card signed by the girls. "Thank you for making money feel less like a threat." I held it longer than I meant to, fingers brushing over the ink. One Friday, Nolan stopped by after work. He leaned against the doorway while I erased the board. "They really listen to you," he said. "They listen because I've lived it," I replied. "And maybe because I don't pretend it didn't break me too." He kissed my forehead. "That's why it matters. You don't just teach survival, you make them feel whole for needing it." As we walked out into the fading light, I looked back once at the center, its cracked floors, humming vending machine, flickering exit sign. It wasn't a church, but it felt sacred. This wasn't the silence of holidays or the cut of separation. It was something slower, softer, a beginning stitched from the broken. I wasn't recreating the family I'd lost. I was creating something new, and in that room with those girls, I wasn't just giving. I was home. It came on a gray Tuesday in January, one of those brittle, wind-bitten mornings where even the light feels tired. I was halfway through logging receipts for the community center's annual grant report when the notification popped up on my laptop screen. "Subject one last time" from Richard Miller. My hands paused on the keyboard. I hadn't seen his name in my inbox since before the wedding. For a second, I just stared. Not fear, not dread, just the jolt of the past knocking where it no longer belonged. I clicked it open. The message was short, typed in that same stiff, proper grammar he always used when he wanted to sound noble. "Jasmine, I know we're not on good terms, but we're on the brink. The bank's talking foreclosure, the taxes. We messed up. This is your family's home. We raised you here. I'm not asking for forever. Just one last time. Please help. Dad. No, I'm sorry. No acknowledgement. Just, we raised you here, as if that erased the live stream, the Venmo request, the fraud, the phone call to Nolan's hospital. As if that meant I owed them rescue. I stared at the screen for a long time. The kettle hissed from the stove. My coffee had gone cold beside me. I could picture the house white siding stained by time, the crooked fence gate, the creak of the screen door in summer. It wasn't nostalgia. It was just memory detached and neutral now. I thought about what it meant to rebuild, what it had taken for me to get here, to make it through that quiet Thanksgiving, to start again with women who didn't carry my name but saw my worth. I opened a new draft. I didn't write in anger, I didn't write to punish, just to say what I needed to say. Dad, I'm sorry the house is at risk, but that place hasn't been a home to me in years. I've spent the last 12 months rebuilding something you never noticed was broken me. You can rebuild your house, I'm still rebuilding myself. I wish you peace. Jasmine. I read it twice, then hit send. There was no reply, no follow-up, not that week, not the next. No dramatic confrontation, no midnight call, just silence. At first, I waited for the crash. The guilt wave, the what have I done spiral, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt a stillness settle around me. Not closure. I didn't believe in that anymore, but clarity. A boundary drawn so finely, so firmly that even I couldn't mistake it for anything but freedom. That weekend, I sat with Ava again. The eucalyptus diffuser hummed quietly beside us. He emailed. I said simply. She tilted her head. And I told her, word for word. She nodded slowly. How did it feel to write it? Strange, I admitted. Like I was finally the adult in the room. You were, she said. You are. I left that session and walked home the long way, passing by the winter trees, stripped bare, their limbs reaching skyward like questions without answers. I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt steady. The kind of steady I'd never known growing up in a house built on shifting ground, on guilt, obligation, unspoken contracts that only went one way. The kind of steady that said, I am mine now, and that's enough. Dinner had long since ended, but Jasmine lingered at the table with Claire and Nolan half listening as they debated whether decaf actually made a difference after 6 p.m. The overhead lights were dimmed low, the kind of glow that makes everything feel like safety. Claire stood, walked into the hallway and returned with something wrapped in soft tissue. She laid it gently in front of Jasmine. This is for you, she said, her voice quiet but certain. Jasmine hesitated, then peeled the layers back. It was a quilt, hand-stitched, each panel a mosaic of color and texture, deliberate and beautiful. In the lower corner, 2 initials had been sewn in navy thread, JK. Her breath caught. Claire smiled. It's yours. I wanted you to have something that's only yours. No guilt, no strings. Jasmine's eyes welled before she could stop them. She nodded, fingers grazing the stitching. It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol. A kind of belonging that didn't need to be earned through sacrifice or silence. This was love offered freely, and she finally knew how to receive it. It happened by accident. Jasmine had taken a different route home from the center, needing air, letting her feet decide. She turned the corner and froze. Her old apartment building stood ahead, worn brick and cracked concrete, still holding the echoes of her former life. This was where the checks were sent, where she took calls every Sunday like it was sacred, where she held on too tightly to a version of family that never held her back. She stood there for a beat, heart calm, not heavy, no bitterness, no longing, just space. The wind tugged her scarf and she turned, walking past the stoop, past the mailbox that once held letters from Blake, begging for money, or Mom forwarding coupons she never used. She carried none of it now. No guilt, no proof, no hope wrapped in denial, just her name, her breath, her pace, forward. And as she crossed the street, sunlight brushing her cheek, Jasmine whispered, not to them, but to herself, love. Without accountability isn't family, it's control. And I've walked away from all of it, every call, every holiday, every trace.